out and holding on and sitting in this very impressive convention center to continue being physically part of the final summit of Y20. And this sound, this hall, the acoustics in this hall is so good that even someone speaking parallelly at the end of the auditorium is heard by the speaker standing here. So I think we should appreciate the get-up of this auditorium, which reflects the aspirations of 21st century India. Friends, I'm delighted to be here, and I'll not take much of your time because not being in the category of youth, I really do not have much to say here. We have heard one of the most dynamic and young parliamentarians of India speak before me in detail about the transformation that India is witnessing today. I am extremely honored that the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, designated Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation as the Secretariat for Y20. And it is a heartfelt thanks from the entire Secretariat team that we convey to him. It is an opportunity. It has been an opportunity for us to engage with some of the best minds. It was an opportunity for us to work with one of the most dynamic team that represented the Y20. Swami Vivekananda, one of the immortal icons of youth, one of the greatest saints and sages of modern India, visited Varanasi 6 times in his lifetime. And the last few months of his life was spent in Varanasi. So I'm sure you realize that this, one of the most ancient cities of India, a city full of history, full of tradition, a city which is in the throes of modernity and with modern aspirations. And therefore, I think this is a very unique city to have been selected for the final Y20 summit, and especially so because it is the constituency of the Prime Minister of India, from where he is an elected member of Parliament. As I spoke to you, or as I stand before you, these are some of the thoughts that come to mind. There has perhaps not been a single leader in the history of India, political as well as spiritual, social as well as entrepreneurial, youth as well as senior, who has not visited Varanasi and has not been impressed by this city at least once in her or his lifetime. And therefore, it's very symbolic that we have gathered here today. The world has converged in Varanasi. And if you close your eyes for a while and look back, and look within and beyond, just to think that this is the oldest populated city in the world is itself a very fascinating thought. I'm sure since morning you have been welcomed, so I welcome you once again to this civilizational city of Varanasi. In 2013, India was named in the infamous list of fragile 5 economies by Morgan Stanley that indicated the systemic risks emerging economies faced owing to their disproportionately high level of dependence on foreign investments to sustain growth. In the last decade, India has been elevated from the list of fragile 5 to major 5 economies of the world, with now India being the 5th largest economy of the world with a GDP of $3.75 trillion, and is poised to become a $4 trillion economy by early next year. Friends, you are visiting India, and many of you who are of India are living through very interesting times. These times are challenging, These times are aspirational, and these are also times when India is graduating to the next level of being a major and a responsible power. As per Morgan Stanley, this India is different from what it was in 2013. In a short span of 10 years, and this is not India saying, this is the world saying, India has gained positions in the world order with significant positive consequences for the macro and market outlook. India has transformed in less than a decade. Yet, it is not just that. The real accomplishment of India under the Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi is that India achieved this feat along with breaching a record milestone of $770 billion of exports and a robust foreign exchange reserve of nearly $600 billion. This at a time when the world is faced with some of its major crises post World War II. Friends, I want to remind you here that one of the most successful challenges, one of the challenges that India most successfully addressed, a challenge with which the world grappled, was its management of the pandemic. And economic resilience was achieved while India was racked apart by the pandemic. From administering more than 200 crore dosages of made-in-India vaccines to over 1 billion people, entirely free of cost, and providing free additional rations to more than 800 million people throughout the phase of the pandemic, India made sure that no Indian would be deprived of either life-saving vaccines or basic food items. You may be aware that the pandemic which struck the world a century ago saw a major portion of deaths because of starvation. That was majorly avoided in this once-in-a-century pandemic, and India had a major contribution to make towards it. India exemplified the perfect template of public-private partnership wherein India's private sector made vaccines were being administered to the entire eligible population, completely financed by the government of India. Friends, I am mentioning these things for only one reason. As we discuss the future of the world, and Swami Vivekananda, the great philosopher, was one of the earliest proponents of one world, one family, and one future. And it was in Varanasi that he repeatedly gave that call. And you may know that, and many of you, I saw the footages, many of you have visited Sarnath yesterday. It was at the age of 35 that Buddha gave his first sermon at Sarnath, and the core of that sermon also was world oneness, humanness, and compassion. I'm saying this is because this can emerge as a template. This can emerge as a template for the world. These models, handling of challenges and of crisis, which Prime Minister of India has repeatedly said should be in future handled collectively and globally, can be better handled if there are templates and if there are models. And India in the last decade has come up with various models, and all the verticals of Y20 reflect various of those models, be it the future of work, be it health and well-being, be it conflict resolution and peace building, and be it the participation of youth in democracy and policy making. India has come up with a number of templates, and our Y20 track chairs, a very accomplished team which is sitting here, has extensively worked on formulating and articulating those templates for a global narrative. And therefore, and it's very interesting, I'm sure you may be aware, that there is a democratic resurgence in India. while there is a democratic recession and challenge in many countries across the world. I do not make this statement politically. I make this statement from the point of view of participation in the democratic process. In India, we see a resurgence. We see a greater interest amongst youth. And I think that itself is a model, is an example before the world. And you know that if you look at India's handling of this once-in-a-century challenge, this itself has received global accolade. 95 countries across the world were benefited by India-made vaccines. And there were no strings attached. It was an approach which was driven by humanness and compassion. Swami Vivekananda very famously said, one of his utterances was, Atmano mokshartha jagato hitaya cha. In Sanskrit, he uttered this in Sanskrit. In English, it means for personal salvation and for the good of the world. Any template that has been evolved, template of governance, template of crisis management, template of developing future frameworks of collective global living. In all of these, India has been driven by the philosophy of world good and compassion. I think that is one of the essence, one of the essential core philosophies upholding the entire Y20 exercise. Friends, as I said, that we are living through very interesting times in India. And I'll take you through a very short listing. Tejasvi has referred to some of them. But to understand how a civilizational nation, which is as ancient as India, which has had challenges of various sorts, internal challenges, societal challenges, and how that nation, aspiring towards the 21st century, is transforming itself from the grassroots upward, is a very fascinating journey. And as you go around India, as you look closely at India, and as some of our Y20 delegates who are representatives, ambassadors of India, led by the chair Y20, also articulated before the world, you can clearly see, you can clearly feel, if you go around this country today, that there is a fundamental transformation for the good happening. Ease of living, ease of working is visible across this country. If I were to give you a few figures, on this transformation and this societal transformation, this transformation of mindset that is taking place in India, the scale of thinking which has been exponentially enhanced, it is mind-boggling for many. For example, if you look at it in this way, I mean, if you make a comparative analysis of the populations of various countries and the population of India that is getting benefited, that itself hits you. If you look at the medical insurance provision that has been put together, envisioned by Prime Minister Modi, it has made a difference to 500 million people in India, people who had no access to medical insurance in the past. आप थोड़ा अगर थोड़ा कम बोलेंगे तो मैं बोल पाऊंगा. आप इतना बढ़िया ये हॉल है कि आप वहां बोल रहे हैं तो मुझे एको सुनाई दे रहा है. तो उसके लिए ही हम लोग थोड़ा ताली बजा सकते हैं इस हॉल के लिए. इतना बढ़िया इकोसिस्टम है इसका. धन्यवाद. I was just telling them to appreciate the acoustic systems of this hall, for those who were wondering why I started clapping. India's 490 million accounts ever since India became a republic, and even before that when we were a colonized country, and even after that for the last 7 decades, there was no concept of financial inclusion. If I were to take just one example of banking the unbanked, including financially those who were excluded for 7 decades since independence. Independence is not only political, it has to be economic, it has to be social, it has to be an independence of more opportunities. 490 million people since 2015 have got their bank accounts with a cumulative fund of $25 billion. I mean, I can go on and on with these schemes. For young entrepreneurs, $5 billion was sanctioned to 1.8 lakh accounts. And it has enhanced the life of 400 million people by facilitating ease of living and public health. More than 60 million jobs have been created through the digital economy. And unprecedented efforts for us, which is something which is very relevant. India's call for the International Year of the Millet. In order to ensure that we can collectively ensure global food security in the world, and India has emerged one of the main actors of the global food supply chain. I want to remind you, we were a country which used to be repeatedly assaulted by famines. From there, we are now a confident country which is speaking about global food security. Friends, I wanted to just share these thoughts with you because, as I said, over the next 2 days till 20th August, and you have had the benefit of listening to some of the best minds, you'll keep listening and also discussing. You'll be finally coming out with a document. I think we need to come to this understanding that there are practices of governance, there are best practices of governance which needs to be shared. When we talk about a collective future, when we talk about collectively addressing challenges, we need to also come together and share. This is one of the earliest calls that Prime Minister Modi had made. He has said, knowledge sharing. Let us not be isolated and cloistered into clubs, into exclusive clubs, where we do not allow entry. The only possibility of survival in future is to be one earth and one family. I want to end with Prime Minister Modi's call for focusing on the global south. I think it's a historic call. And for the first time, there is a focus on the need to include the global south in all major global decision making. And I just want to reiterate what he said in January when India hosted the first ever summit of the Global South, where he said, very interestingly, he used the word to re-energize the world. To re-energize the world, we should together call for a global agenda. And what is that global agenda? Respond, recognize, respect, and reform. I think the entire Y20 template, if you look at all the verticals, if you look at the hundreds of discussions that we have had, literally from Nariman Point to Nagaland and from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, more than 1,000 programs. Am I right? Am I right? More than 1,000 programs. The chair, Y20 chair, is nodding in agreement. The basis of these programs, the ideational basis of these programs was exactly this. Can we evolve a framework? Can we evolve a narrative? Can we evolve a praxis which is based on respond, recognize, respect, and reform? Respond to the priorities of the global south. This is what Prime Minister says. that a large section of the world cannot be left out or cannot be left behind in our march towards greater modernity and progress. And how do we respond? By framing an inclusive and balanced international agenda. I think there can be no second opinion. There can be no objection or opposition to this appeal. The agenda has to be inclusive. The agenda has to be balanced. Recognize that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. You can't have a one-size-fits-all model. It has to be a model which is evolving. It has to be a model which is responsive to local necessities. It has to be a model which is tempered to the requirements of various regions and various countries. Respect sovereignty of all nations, rule of law, and peaceful resolutions of differences and disputes. This is an axiomatic truth. Reform international institutions, including other multilateral agencies, because if they are international institutions, they must have space for all. All must be heard in their corridors. It can't be a selective hearing. It can't be a selective entry. So thank you so much, friends. I wish you all the best. It has been a very inspiring and it has been a very interesting 8 to 9 months that the entire secretariat, the entire delegate team, we have worked together. And I think this is an opportunity that comes once in a lifetime. India is poised to work towards the greater global good. She has her civilizational, philosophical, and spiritual message. She has her practical examples and templates of successful governance models. India is offering these to the world, and India is offering these to the world not with strings attached, not with a spirit of barter, but with a spirit of responsibility, of compassion, of goodness, and of camaraderie. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best. I hope we come out with some very interesting deliberations in the coming days. Thank you so much.